bonds business don't really have any idea of who owns what.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and so like that's really scary, right?
It is, and it should be. Most people don't understand that.
So
again,
explain how is it? Because like I think everybody thinks they know who owns this or that.
Right. What we own in our brokerage accounts is an IOU from our broker dealer, just like what we own in our bank account is an IOU from our bank. We don't really own our bank deposits, just like we don't really own the stocks. The company that owns the stocks is a company called the DTC, or technically a subsidiary called CD and Company. It's the biggest company that nobody has ever heard of. And frankly, it owns 99.9% of the securities outstanding. And we think we have a capitalist system. Mm-hmm. Pause on that and think about that. How difficult would it be for that entity to be taken over by a hostile actor? Pause on that. But let's leave that aside and presume that doesn't happen. So they literally, it's a bookkeeping entity. It's something called a clearinghouse that was created back in the 70s by the SEC to try to allow netting of securities transactions in a market where too many trades were happening to move the physical securities around fast enough.
Right.
And so they allowed for, it's almost like the Wells Fargo stagecoaches back in the 1800s with payments. Instead of moving all the cash, they just netted the buys, the incomes and outgoes, the debits and credits, and just moved the net amount of cash as a means by which to try to reduce risk in the system. And at the time, it helped. But what we're stuck with now, 40 years later, is a market structure that requires all trades to clear through that central organization, which is part of the reason why it takes a lot of time to clear trades.
And how long does it take to clear a typical trade?
Well, we just went from T+3 to T+2. In other words, trade date plus 2 days. Right. But of course, technology would enable us essentially in real time to clear those trades. So we're stuck with that legacy market structure.
I mean, is it that people don't know who owns something at any given moment in time, or is it more kind of long-term than that? We think we bought this company, but there are so many intermediaries that we're not really there.
That's right. The accounting systems can get out of whack. And it's a function of the latency and the number of intermediaries through which the transactions have to go. And that's why the system occasionally does lose track of who really owns what. I've encountered it in my business when I worked on the street working with a pension fund where there was securities lending happening that was unauthorized. And they wouldn't have discovered it but for the fact we were working on a pension transaction. And then, of course, there are a number of instances where naked short selling has been revealed, but the most prominent one is the Dole Food case that just came out of the Delaware Chancery Court in February of this year. There were 36.7 million shares of Dole Food outstanding and 49.2 million applications with valid brokerage statements for those 36.7 million shares outstanding. So that delta between 36.7 and 49.2 was just phantom shares that were created from the accounting system out of thin air.
Wow. So it's like all-time stock watering, but this is fully within the system.
It's fully within the system. It's fractional reserving within securities as opposed to fractional reserve banking, which is what the Austrian school was.
So you've written that the biggest beneficiaries of blockchain technology are long-only investors, insurance companies, pension funds, mutual funds, and mom-and-pop investors. They're the biggest losers from today's lack of beneficial ownership tracking in the securities industry.
The investment banks fueled a massive bubble in internet stocks, which was followed by a crash in 2001 that caused $5 trillion in investment losses. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the federal agency which had been created during the Depression to regulate investment banking, had done nothing.
In the absence of meaningful federal action, and there has been none, and given the clear failure of self-regulation, it has become necessary for others to step in and adopt the protections needed.
Eliot Spitzer's investigation revealed that the investment banks had promoted internet companies they knew would fail. Stock analysts were being paid based on how much business they brought in, and what they said publicly was quite different from what they said privately.
InfoSpace, given the highest possible rating, dismissed by an analyst as a piece of junk. Excite, also highly rated, called such a piece of crap.
The defense that was proffered by many of the investment banks was not, you're wrong. It was, everybody's doing it and everybody knows it's going on, and therefore nobody should rely on these analysts anyway.
In December 2002, 10 investment banks settled the case for a total of $1.4 billion and promised to change their ways. Scott Talbot is the chief lobbyist for the Financial Services Roundtable, one of the most powerful groups in Washington, which represents nearly all of the world's largest financial companies.
Are you comfortable with the fact that several of your member companies have engaged in large-scale criminal activity?
You'll have to be specific.
Okay.
First of all, criminal activity shouldn't be accepted, period.
Since deregulation began, the world's biggest financial firms have been caught laundering money, defrauding customers, and cooking their books again and again and again.
Taking care of business every day. Taking care of business every way. I've been taking care of business. It's all mine.
Credit Suisse helped funnel money for Iran's nuclear program and for the Aerospace Industries Organization of Iran, which builds ballistic missiles.
Any information that would identify it as Iranian would be removed.
The bank was fined $536 million. Citibank helped funnel $100 million of drug money out of Mexico.
Did you comment that she should, quote, lose any documents connected with the account?
I said that in a kidding manner. It was at the early stages of this. I did not mean it seriously.
Between 1998 and 2003, Fannie Mae overstated its earnings by more than $10 billion.
These accounting standards are highly complex and require determinations over which experts often disagree.
CEO Franklin Raines, who used to be President Clinton's budget director, received over $52 million in bonuses. When UBS was caught helping wealthy Americans evade taxes, they refused to cooperate with the U.S. government.
Would you be willing to supply the names?
If there's a treaty framework...
No treaty framework. You've agreed you participated in a fraud.
But while the companies face unprecedented fines, the investment firms do not have to admit any wrongdoing.
When you're this large and you're dealing with this many products and this many customers, mistakes happen.
The financial services industry seems to have a level of criminality that is, somewhat distinctive. When was the last time that Cisco or Intel or Google or Apple or IBM,
I totally agree with you about high-tech versus financial services, but high-tech...
So how come?
High-tech is a fundamentally creative business where the value generation and the income derives from actually creating something new and different.
Beginning in the 1990s, deregulation and advances in technology led to an explosion of complex financial products called derivatives. Economists and bankers claimed they made markets safer, but instead, they made them unstable.
Since the end of the Cold War, a lot of former physicists, mathematicians decided to apply their skills not on Cold War technology, but on financial markets. And together with investment bankers and hedge funds.
Creating different weapons.
Absolutely. As Warren Buffett said, weapons of mass destruction.
Regulators, politicians, and business people did not take seriously the threat of financial innovation on the stability of the financial system.
Using derivatives, bankers could gamble on virtually anything. They could bet on the rise or fall of oil prices, the bankruptcy of a company, even the weather. By the late 1990s, derivatives were a $50 trillion unregulated market. In 1998, someone tried to regulate them. Brooksley Born graduated first in her class at Stanford Law School and was the first woman to edit a major law review. After running the derivatives practice at Arnold & Porter, Born was appointed by President Clinton to chair the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which oversaw the derivatives market.
Brooksley Born asked me if I would come work with her. We decided that this was a serious, potentially destabilizing market.
In May of 1998, the CFTC issued a proposal to regulate derivatives. Clinton's Treasury Department had an immediate response.
I happened to go into Brooksley's office, and she was just putting down the receiver on her telephone, and the blood had drained from her face. And she looked at me and said, "That was Larry Summers. He had 13 bankers in his office." She conveyed it in a very bullying fashion, sort of directing her to stop.
The banks were now heavily reliant for earnings on these types of activities. And that led to a titanic battle to prevent this set of instruments from being regulated.
Shortly after the phone call from Summers, Greenspan, Rubin, and SEC Chairman Arthur Levitt issued a joint statement condemning Born and recommending legislation to keep derivatives unregulated.
Regulation of derivatives transactions that are privately negotiated by professionals is unnecessary.
She was overruled, unfortunately, first by the Clinton administration and then by the Congress. In 2000, Senator Phil Gramm took a major role in getting a bill passed that pretty much exempted derivatives from regulation.
They are unifying markets, they're reducing regulatory burden. I believe that we need to do it.
Its underlying technology, and how together they have the potential to change everything from record keeping to the global financial system. The blockchain is a radically transparent platform that allows people to trade with each other in a way that bypasses the need for traditional contracts and intermediaries. Bitcoin is free market money that runs on the internet and isn't controlled by a political entity or central bank. That sounds exciting as hell, but if you're like me, you struggle to understand exactly how a fully decentralized money and public ledger system are going to be implemented and brought to bear on everyday life. So meet Caitlin Long, one of Inc. magazine's 10 business leaders changing the world through tech.
You need a true, fair, free capital market in order to have a vibrant economy, and we don't have that today, and that's what we gain by blockchain.
She's also a former managing director of Morgan Stanley and the current president of Symbiont, which is bringing blockchain technology to Wall Street. You became interested in the Austrian School of Economics in 2008 during the financial crisis.
Yes.
Why did it take the financial crisis to make you interested in the Austrian School, and what are its essential insights into kind of Bitcoin or blockchain technology?
Sure. I was in the industry for 16 years before the financial crisis happened, and the system worked pretty well. And even today, it still does. But that hiccup, I knew there was a bigger story than what we were reading in the mainstream press. And it was, ironically, Tim Geithner's interviews that he gave very close together. The first one of which he said interest rates were too low, and that's why the mortgage market imploded. Mm-hmm. And the second one, he said we should lower interest rates even more. And
so you had somebody who clearly was talking out of both sides of his mouth, yes, or didn't understand from minute to minute what was going on.
Potentially both. Yeah. I don't know, but that's what got me curious. And I started asking all of my big thinker friends who were more thoughtful about the way the system really worked. And one of them said, start reading the Mises Daily Mail, mm-hmm, and you'll figure out how the Fed works. Because by that point, I knew the Fed was at the center of the financial system, and there was something that just didn't quite make sense. So I went deep down the rabbit hole.
So what is it about the Fed's role that you think was central to the financial crisis? And then how does the Austrian School kind of respond to that, or clarify that for you?
Sure. And by the way, I didn't just go into Austrian School. I looked at everything because I just didn't accept the mainstream explanation. But what I figured out was that we didn't have a free market in money. And the most important price in the economy that should absolutely never be tampered with is the price of borrowing money. In other words, the interest rates. And specifically, it's the money market rate of interest that should always be free, because that's what gives entrepreneurs the red, yellow, green signals as to which sector to invest in and over what tenor to invest, short-term versus long-term.
And so the Fed, by manipulating interest rates and the money supply and things like that, it screws with, we don't really know what money costs at any given point.
That's exactly right. I am confident in saying that interest rates would be a lot higher today, than they would be if we lived, than they are today, if we actually had a free market in money, no question. Because you'd have to compensate savers for the risk.
Sir, they can cut the chain off the door, but they can't make us play.
We've decided we're gonna finish what you started, sir.
Yeah, so leave us be, coach. We got shit to do, sir.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Sir, I just want to say thank you. You saved my life.
Thank you, sirs. All of you.
Yo, to all y'all hating on Portnoy and DDTG Global, what the hell you doing? It ain't about his credentials, his investment experience. Shit, it ain't even about the quality of his picks. It's about a changing of the guard. And to quote Moneyball, one of the best value investor movies of all time, if you can't see that, you're dinosaurs. Gonna be sitting on your ass on the sofa in October watching Davey Day Trader land on the moon.